Okay, we'll bring the meeting to order. We're waiting for a few more people to arrive, but we're realizing that quite a few people called in. So for now, we'll bring the meeting to order and just add people on as they come. Because we do not have a quorum, I will not vote on the minutes at this point, but please make sure you review them for next time, and we'll just double it up. This morning, thank you all for coming in this weather. It wasn't, everybody thought it was going to be bad. It was nothing out there right now. The roads are really good. So this morning, we just want to, under old business, make sure everyone keeps in mind that the projected date for everyone to be done with their rollouts is a reminder that it's March 15th, so it's going to be coming up quickly. Just make sure everybody gets their ducks in a row and all the information out there. It was sent out from the office along with the exam, and I just hope everybody has it up and going, and that we're all on the same page by March 15th all together. Thank you again to the whole committee that helped with the collaborative rollout and making sure we got all the information out there and that we had it in a orderly fashion. And again, the protocol committee and really the collaborative committee, I thank you all personally. BLS naloxone rollout update?
Yeah, just keep you informed. In 2014, we did 867 administrations. So far in 2015, we did 96 administrations. That includes ALS on those numbers also. And the number of reported reversals is 27 in 14 and 3 in 15. And right now, this year so far, we've done 3 CBO agencies through our office. So the program is moving along.
All right, thank you. One of the things we had brought up at the last meeting and just kind of touched upon it with an introduction, and we said we'd come back to it. And this morning, Dr. Ashad, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you to talk about spinal immobilization. And one of the things that's happened since I spoke to you is STAC has tabled the topic. So the floor is yours.
Fair enough, absolutely. So I guess we start off by saying this is a topic that remains to be controversial. Nevertheless, having just returned from the Eagles conference in Dallas, it is something that is on the national agenda. And in regards to the preponderance of evidence that continues to be developed, we have a good 25 to 30 papers that are evidence-based. We have national guidelines from the National Association of EMS Physicians, NAMSP, the American College of Surgeons, ACS, and ASAP has just released their new clinical policy and guidelines regarding rigid spinal immobilization. I personally am of the opinion that going forward, it's almost unethical to continue to provide rigid spinal immobilization because of the harm that is very clearly evident in regards to the process. So just a bit about the concept. Yeah, if I break my femur, I splint from the joint below to the joint above and provide stability, which increases patient comfort. The spine in itself, as we very clearly know, is a curved anatomic shape and is not predisposed to effective immobilization on a rigid spine board. Evidence thus far, significant worsening outcomes in regards to functional residual capacity. Patients are at high aspiration risks. In fact, because it's a glossy surface, there have been studies that show there's in fact increased mobilization when people are on the spine board in comparison to the EMS cot. And then certainly elderly comorbid patients who have fallen nursing homes are predisposed to forming pressure ulcers within 45 minutes of being in a longboard. And we've all had experiences and encounters where patients are 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. We fail to clear them in the emergency department. So it is certainly something that's on the national agenda and it's being pushed. As mentioned, the New Hampshire was the first state to go completely longboard free. Connecticut was the second state. I had an opportunity to speak at length with the LA EMS medical director, Dr. Mark Epstein, as well as several medical directors from Florida. Their cities and counties, including LA, Tampa, Miami, are essentially all longboard free, and there's a tremendous amount of collaborative videos and protocols that are coming out of Kansas City under the leadership of Sabina Braithwaite. So it's something that is continuing to be discussed. There's market buy-in from the surgeons themselves, and I had written a draft protocol for us to review. I don't think we're quite at that stage yet. But I think there was, Dr. Murphy, specific feedback from neurosurgeons who are concerned with it. Can we just air that out? Because that's it. I in fact got in touch with my mentor, Dave Cohn, in Connecticut, who's like, that's a new argument for me. We don't have any issues with neurosurgeons in Connecticut or New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's what they said at CMAC, and why it was such a big deal that STAC did not move forward on it. The people in the room, I was not at the meeting. This is what I was told. The people in the room that were not in favor of getting rid of it was the neurosurgical contingency on STAC.
We don't know why.
Yeah.
So, in our Dutchess County meetings with Arlington LaGrange, we were trying to just parse that out a little bit more. And it seemed we were unable to see what specific medical issue they had concern with, because the evidence now is, again, overwhelming. I presented a CME on this topic 3 or 4 nights ago, and the parallel I drew was, if longboards were a drug, the FDA would have long banned that. So again, regarding the ethics of do no harm, especially in the pre-hospital environment, is something we should continue to discuss. One thing that, a nuance that we had maybe unearthed was, while they had tabled the issue, they recommended that individual regions who wanted to pursue a non-punitive strategy should be able to continue to do that. So I'm not sure if we have specific guidance regarding that, or if you guys have heard anything along those lines.
I mean, I think that you see more and more of it, that across the country, the papers are coming out that it's definitely something to do. I was shocked when she told me they brought it up, that STAC had, and that's why they tabled it, because there was so much controversy, and I guess the biggest contingency that was saying we couldn't just get rid of backboards was not there, so that's why they tabled it.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and it was right before CMAC, like the day before CMAC. So, like, Dr. Daly, who's part of our collaborative thing, who's so anti-backboard, could not make the meeting because they didn't tell him. You know, well, they told him, but it was like last minute, so he couldn't get there. Right, right at the, you know. So, one of the things that also came up was that they make sure that STAC meetings are publicized ahead of enough time in advance so that people can get there, because I'll go too. I'm gonna start going to the meetings. I won't be a voting member, but he's a voting member.
So, what do y'all want to do?
Well, I think that, you know, everybody should take a look at the draft protocol. I mean, we still gave it out to everyone, you know, and I think that we need to definitely be moving in that direction of looking at this from a real perspective. The problem, I think, is going to be if the state protocol keeps it, we can't get rid of it, right?
Yeah, but actually, CMAC actually did pass, you know,
Yeah,
the
they
approval
want
of the
to.
protocol.
Yeah, they want to move
So, I
forward.
mean, they did, the TAG did report. So that's actually what's coming today, just to ask for an advisory, because as far as we're seeing, the hospitals already are reacting to this, that they don't want the patients on the backboards. We're having crew issues.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my take is that if CMAC did approve.
But if it's state protocol still says backboards, don't we have to follow that, or no?
No, state protocol, no, I don't think so, because we've already had an action by CMAC.
Okay.
I think they're just waiting for the department to put it in, you know, as far as the formal protocol. Clearly, the 2008 updated spinal protocols on the website is trash, you know, so I personally, I think we're at a crossroads right now. We
Yeah, because
understand
Dr. Young
what the
was,
state's gonna do, and,
Really?
and, you know, that takes time, but the hospitals are already reacting to it. You know, they don't want the patient on the backboard, crews are coming in. One thing that's, CMAC did do last time was, again, the statement is repeated here in the protocol. The backboard is one of multiple modalities that can be used to minimize spinal movement. Electing not to use a backboard will not constitute a deviation from the standard of care. So I think we have coverage.
yeah, and they talked about how you could use it to move a person if you want, like if you
Yeah.
feel like you have to use that hard board to move somebody, but you get them off the board, and not to equate cervical spine immobilization with a backboard. That was the other big point.
So let me clarify the way I've written this protocol, and it's certainly evidence-based, and it takes into account all these various concerns, just having conversations with medical directors at a national level. So the longboard, it's not like we're gonna have a tag sale, you know, get rid of all the longboards.
Firewood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who knows what that'll do to the ozone.
Recycle.
Longboards should and could be used for patient extrication purposes.
Mhm.
But the science comes down to if, in fact, we're getting prepared for transportation, the EMS cot provides a greater amount of spinal immobilization than, in fact, there's a rigid spine board. So certainly, if you have a multi-trauma patient that's unable to ambulate, unable to transport, then that still warrants transport with an EMS longboard. For the great majority of patients, you can use it as an extrication device and have them either self-transfer or transfer to the cot and then pull the board out from underneath. Reverse takedowns are, in my opinion, frankly unethical. There's so many bad things about this. If a patient is ambulatory on scene, you can certainly make the determination to place a C-collar. This is independent. We're talking about selective rigid spinal mobilization. If the patient needs a collar, we'll have that debate in about a year. But we're not quite there yet, and we're gonna discuss the issues separately. That's probably politically the better way to affect change. Certainly reverse takedowns are unethical. And then the third point is for penetrating trauma. For penetrating trauma, there's almost never an indication to use rigid spinal mobilization. So that's something that we need to just start.
Yeah, and it's just really, it's a, you know, it's a change in just this, like,
Dogma.
yeah, that's been there forever. It was kind of like when amiodarone first came out and we thought about not using lidocaine, you know, that was the same kind of thing when vasopressin came out and we thought something other than epinephrine. So it's all these things that are, you know,
Well, at least amiodarone had a lot of money behind it
A lot
to
of
influence.
point well taken.
Someone should have invented an alternative to longboards that cost a lot of money.
Well,
A very expensive sheet.
Biodegradable longboards.
you know, just one thing is, you know, just looking over my calendar, the RTAC is gonna be meeting. The Hudson Valley Regional Trauma Advisory Committee is gonna be meeting on the, I guess it's Friday, the 13th of March, at Good Samaritan, okay?
Do you know the
At,
time?
Yeah, 9:30 to 12, is what I have, so, yeah, March 13th is the, Hudson
Can you be
Valley-
there, Dr. Shuck?
So I think, you know, this needs to be a major agenda item there, and I plan to be there at least for part of it. But I think this needs to be pushed, and at least, you know, if we're getting resistance from the, you know, from the surgeons on a statewide level, we need to push it up through the regional. You know, I don't know, maybe there is no resistance, but we should consolidate what's going on,
Yeah.
you know, this discussion within the region.
Do you remember Dr. Young? He was
Yeah.
getting hot about it, you know?
I really don't think that overall there's any objection, you know, and again, they're really emphasizing, you know, rigid collar and minimized movement, and they're not even talking about the board other than it being one way you could move somebody, but again, standing takedown, no board, nothing like that. I mean, and I think everybody's going the same direction. I think the hospitals, as I said, by evidence-based medicine, moving that same direction, and now we're having, not a conflict, but now we're having the fact that, you know, EMS is just saying, we haven't been told to go. You know, we understand, we haven't been told to go yet, but I think that we do need some coverage from this body, whether it's an advisory or not, because I think we have to move forward and give, you know, our EMS field providers, you know, the okay to go ahead and do what we know we should be doing. Only problem we have, quite honestly, is that, you know, again, the state takes forever for the protocol, and it takes even longer for us to get the damn stuff out of the curriculum and the training and the testing. Because right now we have one of the practical skills stations they all take right around that backboard, and then we have the state exam right around that backboard. So our only problem is that, you know, that's a little dilemma we have, and really, our educators are really handcuffed in the classes right now, because they're going into these classes this semester, saying that we probably shouldn't be using it as backboards, yet by curriculum, by, you know, the state requirements, I gotta train them to use it.
right, it's still there in a big
Yeah,
part.
I just think that,
But I don't think that we can stop what we're doing to move
Right.
forward for practice because education is lagging or the political system is lagging, you know, there's that backup. I think if we have CMAC approval here, that's pretty good to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we
for us.
voted on it, and, that is our desire to move forward. However, I have to tell you, Dr. Young from the state was like, he was like red in the face and got up from the table, you know? And it's a thing, and they went back to this thing of, they're gonna, the state wants to follow what STAC says. And so, because there was so much back and forth, STAC, what I got on the last thing is they tabled it. But I think, you know, it only behooves us to move in the direction of what's the right thing to do. And I agree, we can't hold up, proper care and doing no harm just because people are slower in the forces of bringing it along to catch up. And I think it's going to be confusing for the people coming off of new training, there are new medics coming up. We just spent, 6 weeks on learning about backboards and takedowns and strapping and how to strap them down to this thing, and now we're not gonna use it? So it's going to have to be something, we will have to work very heavily on, but I think it's something that we have to do. I don't think we can just ignore it.
so I think that obviously EMS, at least medicine EMS, was forward by evidence-based medicine and by medical legal responsibility. And I think right now we have evidence-based medicine that's proving we shouldn't be using them. And now we're gonna have increased liability if we do wind up using them and somebody wants to make an allegation
Yeah.
that, and we had this knowledge, we did something that may have provided harm to the patient. So now I think it's thrust upon us that now we might be more liable,
So
liable if we
one
don't.
of the aspects that I discussed was what is the origin of this policy? Why has this become common practice among all EMS agencies across these 50 great states? And it was policy that had been developed in 1968, and it was two cases in the pre-hospital space were cited to develop these policies at large, and I reviewed this all in my CME. One case was a patient with a depressed skull fracture who later developed neurologic disability. And another was a patient with a gross T5 transection that upon pre-hospital evaluation had neurologic deficit. So those two cases in 1968 were used to develop this policy of rigid spinal mobilization. It's just that it was a time of great change and it rapidly got picked up without an appropriate evidence base.
Yeah, that's gonna be the time when the whole push was for us to go to the scene of an accident
Correct.
and help
When
people.
we were transitioning from hearses to ambulances.
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, that was when the NTSB and all that
You got
kind
it.
of national traffic and safety stuff
Exactly.
started happening.
So we got-
So we actually do have a quorum now, because we have 7, and there's 6 that are not here. Yeah, I didn't catch it, yeah. So we could vote on an advisory, if you guys wanted to put an advisory forward. How does the committee feel? I mean, I'm in favor of it, but, it's not a one-person show here.
Well, how would that fly in the face of the CMAC's position right now?
Well,
That
C-
has not been resolved.
Well,
or-
CMAC's resolved, it's STAC that wasn't resolved. Well, STAC's an advisory committee, again, CMAC is supposed to be really the person that oversees all of it with input from all these places. But I think as a region, we can protect our people by saying this is the direction we're moving in, and I think it's going to happen. I just think that Andy has a very valid point that we need to protect our providers, and this is what we're here for. We're here really to be the advocates for the people in the field and say, this is proper care, this is what we should be doing. And I think, just like other advances in medicine, I think my feeling is we should be helping them and supporting them and say, we would, hold them no harm not to use a backboard. I think that, it's a same kind of process, and we could use the same verbiage that we have in the CMAC draft.
Yeah, and
Policy.
just to be clear, although CMAC had put the seconded motion up, SEMSCO approved it.
Oh, okay. See, I don't go to SEMSCO, so I don't know that's after. So that's
Oh,
another
it's been approved,
positive
yeah.
finding in our behalf, that this is going to move forward. So I think there are gonna be some lags with education, there are gonna be some lags with the policies and such, but I think I'd rather be on the front end of the wave than, not catching the wave, because I think this is solid evidence, solid stuff, we've all been doing it, and people are looking at us like we're crazy, but I think it's time to move forward and have New York catch up.
Certainly, it's beneficial to be on the leading edge of things, certainly. I mean, we just carry momentum, drive passion among our pre-hospital care providers. People were so excited at the CME about this topic. Just to give you a flavor of the rest of the country, when they polled like 5,000 attendees at Eagles all across the country, how many people are already backboard free? About 30% of folks raised their hand. And how many people plan to be backboard free within 3 months? A good 60% of folks. So it's certainly a national trend. Pre-hospital care providers are concerned about liability, and you bring up an excellent point, sir, that in fact the evidence tipping point is it's going the other way. So you may be actually open up to more liability by boarding a patient, certainly with ambulatory unseen things along those lines. So there's great momentum, and I think we would be safe, especially given the CMAC and SEMSCO.
Just one question. What did the American College of Surgeons say on this?
So
Because
they're-
we can,
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the guidelines they have are published in conjunction with NAMSP, which were in middle of 2014, and they all say the same thing: get rid of longboards.
yeah, okay,
And
so.
in regards
so-
to an emergency medicine practitioner, I feel I know a lot more about generalized trauma and multi-trauma than specifically a neurosurgeon does.
Right, I mean, but we have their paper, to- or
Their policy guidelines.
their
It's going by
guidelines.
ACS and NAMSP.
So, if there's a few, folks, out there, in the surgeon, audience that are saying, whoa, 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 I think we have the evidence for it, and I think we should move ahead.
I think if somebody's gonna try to sue us for what we're doing,
Yeah.
boards, they're gonna use those papers. So why don't we use it and just do what it's saying?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, and I think that, it's a thing where most of it is education and people just not realizing it. And one of the things I'm gonna ask Dr. Rashad is, there's a couple of EMS conferences coming up that, in our region, and I wanna give you the dates to see if you're around. Maybe you could do your CME there, and just, and that way we get the word out, this is what we're talking about, this is why, this is where it came from. Ben?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because on the Connecticut side, that rollout has occurred, and the biggest steps of resistance is the tradition of having to use the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are very, very nervous about making the
exactly.
transition for the liability issues and everything else, so I think, getting ahead of that is probably
Yeah.
a very good idea, was that.
And I think it's more in the people that are out there on the volunteer side that are not as much on the, connected to this meeting and such, and so they don't hear it. And all of a sudden they come into the ER and people are yelling at them that they're using the backboard, and they're like, what? So it is a eye-opening kind of new thing that people are not really thinking about, but I think the more we get the word out there, and it would be good for us to, try to move forward.
A number of us that have been involved in EMS education for countless years, had the
A couple.
discussion. And pretty much we've come to believe one thing, and that is, out of the thousands of EMS courses that have gone throughout the state, some who can't teach blood pressure, some who can't do other things, they all did teach the fear of God, for not putting somebody on a backboard if you use the collar. So that was the only thing we found that they probably all taught the same, and now we're gonna have to try to just back this thing up.
I did get to see a video of somewhere, and I won't say where it was, 2 students strapping someone to a backboard in a real-time class. Let me tell you, that backboard needs to go away. When I saw what he looked like afterwards, I'm like, oh my goodness. So can I?
I'll forward you some videos that were developed in Kansas City, and they're meant for general public EMS consumption. So I'll forward them to you if you
Okay,
think they're
and then we
worthwhile.
can
You can
put them.
certainly forward to the group.
So, do you want to, can I make a motion? And let me know if this is something that y'all agree to. A motion that we develop an advisory based upon what Dr. Ashad has put here, and that it has nice definitions in it, the indication, why we don't need it for penetrating trauma, what's the point with blunt trauma, and basically, it's a nice, well-written, and thank you, advisory in draft form that we could talk about using. I know some of you didn't get to read it till today, But I would love to, instead of having to wait, make a motion that we promote the advisory in our region to protect our providers, and maybe we just add that one sentence in here, that we will stand behind and hold without harm anyone who, utilizes this protocol or this advisory due to the fact that, evidence-based medicine is coming out to show us that we've been doing something wrong for a very long time.
This is the one they caught.
Yeah, exactly. Does that sound okay?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? So that's unanimous. Okay, so we'll add in that one little part, and then we'll go from there? Okay. Thank you for all your work, Dr.
My
Rushing,
pleasure.
seriously. Service upgrades, there's none today. Evaluation subcommittee, Dr. Brooks couldn't be here today, but we didn't have any issues. There was none that was put forward. Helicopter committee report, did we hear from Stu Miller? Okay, but there, I don't think they had a meeting, right? There was no meeting since the last,
There has not been.
yeah, right, there was no meeting since
The
last
only,
month.
Dr. Murphy, at the last meeting though, this group approved the protocols for the helicopter, and we haven't seen them distributed, so maybe somebody could follow up and get
Oh.
those distributed.
I
Okay,
do have an update on that.
okay,
There are two regions involved in those protocols, and we're still waiting for Westchester to approve them.
Yeah, the problem was, we got hit by 3 snowstorms in a row that we canceled our meeting and then postponed it over till next week. So we haven't had a meeting, we missed the whole meeting because it was just
So you just need to change
3
meetings to
cancellations.
Tuesdays. Mondays are no good for me,
Right,
just change it to
right,
Tuesdays.
right. Next year we'll do that. But anyway, so we haven't met and so we're way behind on a bunch of stuff. So that's, I apologize for that, but it was local conditions.
imagine the poor people in Boston. Okay, so, so that will, then after that, Mike, we'll make sure they all get out. I put a little note here for myself. And we'll go forward. Quality improvement report, Jeff.
We've had some movement with EPCRs and the move to Nemesis 3. Image Trend has had to put their new platform on hold. They have deemed it unstable with all the additions that they've been putting onto it for requested reports. So they decided that rather than release a product that wasn't ready, they'll hold off and get all the issues fixed.
Yeah. Okay, under new business, there is, a plethora of medication shortages again. I don't even know what to say. It's just this thing where, we have these people sending us in lists that we're trying to tabulate and keep track of, but it's, this report's from one supplier. Some other people might be different, but it's like impressive, the number of drugs that are on there. So again, what we're going to have to do is try to be flexible, try to have alternatives there that people to use, and hopefully be patient that things will come back. I mean, the list here, I'm not gonna read off a list of medications that are, shortages, but it's crazy. And most of them are like really basic drugs. And as you know, if you're working in the hospital now, antibiotics are under that realm. We can't get Zosyn anymore. We can't get, Unison just joined the list. It's like, okay, so these basic penicillin, type antibiotics. So I don't know what to say other than that we have to have an alternative. We have to make sure that people have things they can use and realize that there's gonna be this ongoing onslaught of medication shortages. You didn't have anything else to,
No, I have some information from the REMSCO
okay,
regarding the meeting.
okay, so go with that.
Fine. The Hudson Valley REMSCO met February 4th, and a couple of issues that might be of interest to this, or should be of interest to this party, is that there was a significant discussion about the coordination of EMS services and responses throughout the whole region. And this was precipitated by the EVD preparation that everybody had gone through, and recognizing some of the problems. New York State is under the assumption that there's great communication with all the regions, with all the counties within the regions and with all the regions. It doesn't seem to be evident that there really is that kind of communication. President of the EMS Council, Mr. Michael Witkowski, and our executive director, Buyus, are trying to establish a tag to get that kind of communication going throughout the region, particularly including the health commissioners of the health commission directors of each county as an integral part of that organization. So we should be hearing more about that, and that was one of Andy Lamarca's particular concerns, that we do include the health commissioners for that. In January, early January, a bill was placed before the New York State Commissioner of Health regarding permission or approval for advanced EMS providers to transport blood products during care of a patient. I believe that's still pending, unless Andy has some further updates.
Still waiting signature again.
Okay. And in your packets, it was mentioned at the REMS and now presented, New York State Policy 1401, which all of you should have, which and this is particularly important because many of us here are agency medical directors, all of us are members of Remac, and it's a very detailed, thorough, and thoughtful approach as to how to do remediation of medics who are not meeting the standards that the medical directors recognize as important. And it's detailed about who has to be reported, how to do the reporting, how to follow up on it, and how to involve the Remac and the region for all of that. So I think it's going to be very helpful for all of us to give some clarity about how to approach improving the quality of care out there.
What's the policy number?
1401.
And I think just like all of these bodies and entities, the only way things happen and that we all stay on the same page is communication, and that the information kind of disseminates and kind of moves outward. And that's our responsibilities here. It kind of segues into our responsibility to bring all this information back to each one of our medical control facilities and the agencies we belong to and that we serve with, and to just make sure that information is disseminated. All these things are so important that we do, but it doesn't work unless we do communicate. So that just kind of brings further to the front that we have to make sure we do that. Andy, anything else from SEMSCO?
The only thing that they had a couple of different motions. One was that CPAP was added to the adult respiratory distress protocol for BLS, and that would be something that the BLS service wants to get involved in use of CPAP. They'll come here again. They approved the state medication formula without dosage ranges or indications of routes of
Oh yeah,
administration.
that's right, that was a big one.
Yeah, that was a big one, but in light of
Yeah,
everything that you can't use.
So basically, they came out finally with a whole formulary for the state, and so it has the medications on there. What we asked though was, it was in such detail, it was almost like a pharmacology text.
Yeah.
It had indications, interactions, all these things for each one of the drugs and specific dosages. And what we asked was, just like any formulary, it'd be better just to have them labeled rather than such specific guidelines that would have to be changed all the time, have to be updated all the time. Rather, it would be good to have just a formulary with a list and let the regions put in their protocols the exact dosages and things like that, rather than it coming from the state. So we approved it, removing that part of it.
Another thing is for New York City Board, not for an emotionally disturbed patient, they have the protocol passed to allow midazolam on standing order for crisis situations. And actually, following on to that one, they allowed, a motion was seconded and passed by the body, allow protocols that are approved by CMAC to be utilized by other regions within the usual 30-day notice to, with the usual 30-day notice to the department. So what they're saying is if you want to adopt somebody else's protocol that's already been passed, you can do so in its entirety without having to go through the entire process that we have to go through to change protocol. So something like that, the data summit was indicated, we would be able to almost use it, I don't wanna say carte blanche, but once we send the documentation up, and we can use it.
We still have to go through the regional approval, which puts out a
Yeah.
30-day comment period, and then address the comments when they do come back, and then we can move on
But
to.
we
Yeah,
don't send
but
it
it's
on-
short.
We don't need to wait for the
It's
state.
much shorter.
Right, it's so much better to, especially if something was approved, it only makes sense that why does another area have to come and go through the whole full approval process again? So we're trying to streamline things and make it a little quicker, yeah.
Suffolk County EMS pilot project will allow an EMT the use of a single lumen supraglottic airway during adult cardiac arrest. They have to have two providers, BLS providers, one has to be an EMT, one could be a CFR. And again, they have to have end-tidal capnography as well, but it's strictly a pilot, strictly for an arrest, an adult arrest there. And the other thing was that, regarding the previous motions made by CMAC and SAMSCO that support all critical care and paramedic level agencies having to have controlled substances by May of this year.
May
Of
15th.
2015.
The department learned that they cannot mandate that, or they cannot go out and enforce it right now. Legal is working on it, but right now, because it would require someone to get a license with a controlled substance, they could enforce it. However, in a vote of solidarity, CMAC had pretty much said that, they were not backing down, that they, do wanna have this, this met by the end of May, and that they advocated the Remacs, to stand fast on that, and any agency that does not possess those, that they should probably consider that they are not truly an ALS provider. So, those were the main things that were.
The rationale behind that was, if, you have an agency, an ALS agency, showing up to a scene and a kid's seizing, you want them to have benzos to be able to, stop the seizure, it only makes sense. You have an agency roll up to a, multi-trauma and the person's, leg is hanging off, you want them to be able to have something to give them for pain. So that was the premise behind it, that this should be the standard of care, and why CMAC was standing fast on it. I know that there's been some, roadblocks put up and such, but it really is, really it was only one area. We realized.
And Long Island, obviously is dragging it, because many of the smaller services upstate did,
Yeah,
find ways to do it, and Long Island, Nassau, whatever, it's still, Nassau, stuff like that, was still fighting it. But again, Dr. Daly's point was that, if you don't do it, you're not providing the standard of care.
yeah, and that's, that was the basic thing, to try to make it more, common sense of what would you think of, a paramedic ambulance rides up and can't give you the medicine that you need, and your kid's seizing right there in
Well,
front of them?
some of those areas, the quote-unquote paramedic unit goes out, doesn't have narcotics, calls another paramedic unit in to back them up that has it, to give it. Obviously, there's a delay, that's number one. Number two, you're wasting resources. You're tying up two units that could be doing other, emergencies, so.
Right, which the first unit should be able to take care of.
That was all.
And I'm not sure why they're recalcitrant to doing it. I mean, it's not that it's you have to apply for the application and such, but still, I don't know.
It's not too much different than everything else.
I know, and it's
Yeah.
just getting the paperwork in order and having somebody do it for you. You're
A little closer to Connecticut, we might just,
Annex to Connecticut.
via ferry. Okay.
There are two other things that have come down. The CMAC has also created a hemorrhage control tag that's going to be looking at some new hemorrhage control to evaluate what's existing, and packing wounds and other devices that might be available. And the second thing that actually passed, which is an Article 30 change, that allows school nurses to have unprescribed EpiPens available in the school. So they have to register through the regional office for that, same as day camps and stuff like that, but you might see some of that coming down the line, where there'll be school nurses giving EpiPen if there's an allergic reaction.
Under the new the hemorrhage tag committee, I brought forward all the information and gave it to them about the IT clamp, and trauma surgeons hate them. They do, they absolutely hate them. What did they call it? I'll have to think of the word. They really think it's a terrible
Hair
device.
clip with teeth.
Yeah.
Say it again?
Hair clip with teeth.
Yeah, it was something, I was just like, oh, okay.
Just regarding that though, the wound packing, we do use, the products today. Are we outside of our scope if we were involved in packing the wound?
No, I mean, because that's basic first aid, putting pressure on a
I'm just
wound.
saying,
No,
Yeah.
they're talking about.
No, but I mean, it's the same,
Hemorrhage
same,
control.
it's the same principle, it's just like holding a wound.
I mean,
You
because
know.
again, there was so much issue made of that, and I
Yeah,
thought I
no,
was missing something. I
No.
thought it was certainly with their skill level, the products were identified.
no, that goes back to the basic stuff, just like putting pressure on, packing the wound is the same principle behind
So
it.
it was my understanding that the IT clamp, when we did discuss it, we all agreed that it was just another hemorrhage control device and was acceptable.
Yeah,
Yet
the certain,
without specific naming that device. Just,
I think
we
the
said airway
requirement-
devices, we don't specify each airway device. And it was my, does anybody have recollection of that meeting?
Yeah, I agree with what you said.
I'm not sure what the objection was on the part of the surgeon, did they have a specific reason? for
yeah,
disliking it?
what's the name of the gentleman from Westchester?
Marini? Dr. Marini?
It could be. They have a real problem at the trauma center with it. They don't like the IT clamps at all. They don't think it should be on a wound. They think it destroys the wound edges, doesn't really help, and doesn't really clamp the hemorrhage. They think that you have this sense of security that this thing has brought the wound edges together, and yet, that it's really not beneficial. It'd be much better just to pack a wound or use a clotting device on top, a powder or one of the other TXA or one of the other agents. They feel is much more efficacious.
I definitely think the incidence of, based on my experience, I think the incidence of wounds that truly would need that kind of device versus the amount that would probably get used would probably be, there'd probably be a fair discrepancy, meaning there'd be a lot of them floating out there, potentially sticking people, with maybe only a few people who may have ever seen a benefit from it. So that's my particular concern, is it may have benefit in a limited situation, whereas you can get the similar results with packing.
Any other comments? Okay. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, regarding that New York State policy 1401, if anybody doesn't have a copy of that, that's regarding the medical direction control. That was Bill sent that out in an email of February 25, just last week, so you should be able to find it in your files that way if you don't have copies of it here.
It's also available on the New York State Bureau of EMS site under policies and procedures. And if you still can't find it, give me a call. We'll send it out to you.
Okay.
And then I have a couple of quick things to add in
Yeah.
new business if we have time.
Go ahead.
Fantastic. So, topics that we have been discussing in the Dutchess County TAG meeting regarding our educational agenda for the next 6 months. So, a little bit of a scope of practice conversation, but we talked about EMS leading the evidence-based charge in pre-hospital care. Certainly, there are a lot of things that we're doing that are more evidence-based than the emergency departments, and we recognize that as a great, tremendous benefit of our community. So simple things that are within the scope of practice, again, teaching new dogma that's now evidence-based that can provide dramatic changes in patient outcomes. So high flow nasal cannula for our peri-intubation or intubation patients. So our common practice has been, if somebody needs BVM supported ventilations or you put on a 100% non-rebreather, we now have great evidence to show for your sickest patients who are profoundly hypoxic, in addition to putting a face mask on, a non-rebreather at 15 liters per minute, with a separate oxygen source, put on a nasal cannula, bump that up to 15 liters per minute.
You're getting inflation, basically.
Absolutely. So essentially, think about it this way, is you're going to intubate a patient who's remarkably sick and ill. And now all of a sudden you take away that mask or you take away that BVM, how much oxygen is that critically ill patient getting? Big fat 0, right? Let's say you take a look, you need to suction, Not quite sure if I see the cords. How much oxygen is that patient getting? Big fat zero, right? All right, maybe I intubate the esophagus. Now I need more time. Now I'm trying to get my tracheal intubation, right? So we have now multiple papers in the pre-hospital and critical care literature that high flow nasal cannula from a separate oxygen source is a remarkable adjunct that reduces peri-intubation complication, reduces peri-intubation hypoxia and symptomatic bradycardia. So that's something that's within both the BLS as well as the ALS scope of practice that we need to start emphasizing educationally as medical directors. The second thing,
Just before you leave that topic, it is a part of the collaboratives for medication facilitated intubation.
Yeah, we put it in
And
there.
it says consider high flow nasal oxygen during intubation.
Yeah,
so yeah, let's just put it out, make sure we spread the
yeah,
word.
I said it to my guys in the department, they're like, oh, it takes me just 2 seconds to intubate. I go, it's still something you should do, and keep it, because everyone always rips it off, and I'm like, no, keep the nasal cannula there, just keep doing your thing, let's keep
Absolutely.
going. And even with, when we do a procedure on people in the department, another place that, you know, even though you have everything sitting right there, I crank it up while they're asleep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Why give
I
your
know,
patient a
because-
stress test?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
give them a stress test?
Well-
when
Why
you're-
wait for hypoxia?
Yeah,
Why
and-
wait
But
for
we should all be using a title anyhow, so.
Yeah.
And tidal high flow nasal
And
cannula.
we get the new pads, the real long extended nasal cannula,
Yeah.
the nice little pads, have you seen those? They extend up further, and so you really can deliver 10, 15 liters, and people don't even realize it. This new high flow delivery,
So
it's
those
so
are
good.
those are cool because you can humidify the oxygen
Yep.
and you can actually turn your flow rate up to 20 or 30, which intrinsically provides peak. So second point along that spectrum, and this is something that we have less buy-in pre-hospitally, is something called a PEEP valve, P-E-E-P valve. And in New Jersey State, we're fond of calling BVMs the bag of death, okay? It's unethical to oxygenate your patient only during half the respiratory cycle. I have the sickest patients, their respiratory rate is 0, it may be a cardiac arrest, certainly less than 4. I'm bagging, when I depress the bag, they get oxygen, when I let go of the bag, there's no oxygen, right? I press the bag, there's oxygen, I let go of the bag, there's no oxygen. So the sickest patients are only getting oxygenated during half of the respiratory cycle. It's ludicrous, okay? Simple $5 PEEP valve, you throw it on your BVM, it keeps positive end expiratory pressure, just like when we throw them onto a vent, we'll have intrinsic PEEP. So now they're getting oxygenated during 100% of the respiratory cycle. Simple $5 valve. If we can promote buying it within our agencies, I think it's something that dramatically improves outcomes. It's within our scope of practice. It's minimal, it doesn't really bother folks. And I had medics who were breaking apart or ripping apart CPAP circuits, taking the PEEP valve from that and then applying it here. So $5 as opposed to $100. It's certainly, if we can have a broad rollout and certainly as medical directors emphasize the educational concepts of the PEEP valve, avoid the bag of death, oxygenate your patients 100% of the time, especially the sickest.
Any comments?
So,
Okay.
so then how do we bring this forward so that the region adopts or encourages the education of these topics?
Well, I'm gonna fire off to the collaborative committee. After every meeting, I always fire off, things that they need to know. So these will be 2 of them added on there. The high flow nasal cannula, we already had put in during, intubation, medically assisted intubation. But, I think that it should be there for really so many other avenues, even on the BLS side, to be honest with you. But I always send that up so that we all, add it into that conversation, and what happens is everybody comments on it and emails fire back and forth, because there could be other places doing it. The PEEP valve I haven't put in there, but I'll make sure we add it in. And then when to go forward, what we can do is, the next meeting, can you just shoot everybody, or shoot us one thing of literature on it, and
Oh, yeah.
we'll get it out to everybody?
I'm all about the literature. I actually have an
Yeah.
evidence-based EMS blog. I'll talk to you about it later.
Yeah, and that way we just have one thing that people can read, because that's what everybody wants to do. Once you introduce something new, I think it's only fair that people get to read, see what's happened, where has it been used, what's the evidence behind it, and then we can move forward with it and add it in. And I would imagine that there's gonna be other people that wanna do the exact same thing, so it probably will be added to the agenda of the collaborative.
How much people are you talking about?
Yeah, it just puts in 5 to people.
Then,
So we can just do it as an heirloom
Yeah.
device.
Yeah.
Which are wide open.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be approved or voted.
No,
Yeah, I think it's.
because it's still within the scope of practice.
Yeah.
Pam, one other thing, if we have an open time here.
Sure.
is, the DOH put out, Part 800 changes. Again, if you remember, we did this in the past, and there was a comment period that we had a really small amount of time to look at these things. The state did receive a bunch of comments and made some changes. There's about 35 pages of changes that are there for Part 800. There's a revised comment period now up until the middle of March. And so I'd sent those on to the region, maybe they could distribute them out if we wanted to make comments or send anything back to the state. That's open until March 13th.
So we have to move them that quickly. Do you have it? Did you say? Okay, yeah, so send that out so everybody can look at it.
Yeah, a large part of that's based on the background of people themselves, so background checks and things.
All important, Eric?
Also, under new business, I was wondering what people's experience has been with, using Toradol, because I'm getting some feedback from my ER docs on a few, and you know, look, someone had chest pain, so they gave them, Toradol, and then they had a dissection, so, now, you know, I don't know what the evidence shows, but, intuitively, you would think it's probably not a good idea, but, we don't know.
I think there are, I had a conversation with one of the medics regarding this two overnights ago, and there's a national shortage of Toradol in the emergency departments. So in fact, we have more Toradol on EMS trucks than we do in the EDs. But it's a tough drug to use pre-hospitally because there are in fact so many contraindications. It's probably easier not to. You get into more trouble using it pre-hospitally. There are a lot of contraindications, and you just have limited amount of information. You certainly don't know the patient's baseline creatinine.
Right, I
And
mean,
so
I
the
think that's
exclusionary
where
diagnoses
it's
are-
hard
it's tough.
not to use it without that
It's tough.
background information, which we can look up in a jiffy. And my utilization is very narrow, colic. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, personally, I use Toradol a fair amount. I could say my practice has changed to the limit, the lack of it. But I think that it's like every other medication out there. There's no magic medication that does everything. I mean, it's like IV Tylenol. It's a great medication until the manufacturer discovered that it's a great medication and tripled the price. So,
That also recently happened, we should note, for intranasal Narcan. The stock price in a single day went from 58 to 85, which was very good for me.
Actually, someone came up with, actually, one of my last shift, one of the EMS guys came up and said, what's going on here? They've jacked up the price. Now that everybody wants to use it, they're fleecing us. And he asked in the context, and I really didn't have a conversation beyond that, but he asked in the context, is there anything that we can do to kind of address that? Because it seems silly to have something that used to cost $40-some-odd, now is practically twice that. I don't know the exact numbers, but.
Yeah, I can discuss with you.
Hey, Pam, is there any discussion about BLS providers being able to draw up Narcan from a vial and then administering it using the mucosal atomizer? I know that at some point in the past there wasn't because there were syringes and things involved, and they couldn't do that. And one of the ways of combating the price of this stuff going up so high.
Same
That
issue
was-
with
that was a
Epi.
concern.
Right,
With that,
exactly,
there
I was
the
just
same-
gonna bring that up.
same issue.
Seattle has
Yeah.
gone from the EpiPen to the BLS folks drawing it up and using it, and they've
Yeah.
cut their cost way down.
So just so people know the numbers, it's $6 versus $300 doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually, someone's gonna put a proposal on the Westchester, or the Westchester Remac this next meeting about that issue. And change their practice, and they've got all the papers and stuff.
So maybe for the collaboratives then as well?
Wow,
Yeah,
that's-
maybe we could. I mean, this is definitely the kind of thing that would benefit. I mean, that's the whole point of being a collaborative protocol, so that everyone can work together and make more action. So.
But I
That would
think,
be intramuscular? How would they would do an injection on it
For which thing?
for the epi?
For that?
Yeah, they
be
would
the
do
same
the-
thing.
They would just
I,
draw up a syringe, they'd have a little syringe and they'd draw it up from
And that's
a multi-dose bottle.
I think that's a regulatory issue. scope of practice and the BLS, and I think that's why
I think
it
it
does
does
go through
scope.
right now. I think that they need to make a regulatory change to allow them to draw, first of all, to drop any medication. I think even if the Narcan was in there, it might face the same fate, but also the administration of a medication, they're not right now. You know, in their scope, there's no injectable, you know. So it has been discussed, I think it's been brought up, you know, at CMAC or at SEMSCA too, because somebody did, I think, a study on how much it was costing for the EpiPens, because some of them would obviously be expired, never used, and they'd have two on and the pediatric ones, and it was just an astronomical amount, really.
That's killing a lot of volunteer agencies.
Is it in their BLS education though, drawn up with a needle and something?
No,
I don't think so.
And again, you have to watch, certain textbooks will have an addendum that will have things like that in it, because certain states, it is within their scope of practice, and the textbooks are sold nationwide. But in New York State, no, it's a scope of practice, as far as I know. And that's why even when you got to like the supraglottic airways and stuff like that, I mean, there's a little wiggle room there, but it's certainly a pilot, but yes, an injectable is an issue.
So I'm sorry, Gary, just to clarify, is it the issue of drawing it up, or is it the issue of
Well, both really, both sides of that.
So even using an atomizer?
Yeah, because they wouldn't, they shouldn't be in possession of the med, you know, they shouldn't be in possession of the needles and the active draw up, and then they certainly aren't covered to inject.
Right, well, I'm thinking about the Narcan and using the atomizer, because that,
Yeah.
you know, that might be a way to.
And once you get into an atomizer, that's fine, but it's drawing up,
That's an issue.
yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be an issue.
On the Narcan, if it's a New York State BLS service, we do have some here that we can give them. All right, but it's a BLS or FR or fire department or police department that we get an issue with too.
But it's still tragic that this thing gets, you know, rocketed up in price, just because now we're gonna try to put it everywhere and use it everywhere, and it's just so bad.
As a workaround, for those BLS agencies that are connected to ALS agencies, BLS units that are going out, why couldn't the ALS unit put together a BLS kit? Why couldn't the ALS component? In other words,
I was thinking the same thing, that
a
they would do
1-to-1,000
the drawing and then
and
you
then
would have.
naloxone, make your own syringes in office.
Who's gonna give it?
I'm sorry?
Who's gonna administer it?
The
If you
BLS
give an-
person.
If you give an EpiPen.
They're allowed
can't
to
you
give EpiPen, they're allowed to give nasal naloxone.
It's a difference between an
Yeah.
auto injector and
Yeah.
actively injected.
Yeah.
It's regulatorily, it's murky.
The only way it would work is if,
And we-
you filled the syringes and you put the atomizer on for them,
That's
but
it.
you couldn't leave the needle on, cause they can't
Right.
inject, but they can
Yeah,
atomize.
first of all, you know, you got purity issues, you
Yeah,
got, you know,
yeah.
expiration issues, you got, you know, who you turn it over to, it's not a workable solution, really. That's dangerous, yeah, really, and quite honestly, if we hand it over to somebody and it's like, you know, who we're gonna say drew it up and who's packaging it?
Well, that could all be documented, and it's no different than having a nasal naloxone auto injector.
I don't know any agency that would do it, you know, we take all risk on
I'm
ourselves.
not, I just
Our risk
throwing it out there,
managers
is that a
like
way, a workaround, way to work around the limitation, cost limitations?
I still think on the EpiPen side, no, because you're still gonna have them inject.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, Epi wouldn't work that way, but, maybe if the hospital pharmacy was in an agreement with an agency that way, that they provided it specifically, that could work for the Narcan.
Could work great, because it has to be patient's own.
Right, but I don't,
You're right.
you're
Yeah,
still,
what's-
you're still Epi auto injector, that's an issue.
Yeah, what would you have for an expiration on it too? You get to put them into stock in the trucks.
The same as whenever the pharmacy decides it is.
Right, give them the bottle. From the source code.
Well, I still think it's horrible that the drug companies are doing it, that's,
Yeah,
that's,
that's the
bottom
You know
line.
what's gonna, you know what's
Yeah,
gonna
that's
happen.
just-
They
You
did
know
it
what's gonna happen
with the Tylenol,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Now,
That's really-
I don't know, that there was some lurch about the Tylenol stuff, they said what we need to do is just be giving 2,000 milligrams of Tylenol instead orally, and we'll probably get the same effect as the injectable, but, we haven't done that up till now, so.
all right, any other new business?
Just for everybody's information, the protocol committee at least discussed looking at the recertification process, and we'll be examining some additional options to possibly include some skill-based procedures and less attendance at continuing medical education lectures. So we're gonna look at that as we move forward here in the future. So if anybody has suggestions, to make sure you get them into the protocol committee.
Yes, we're re-looking at the CME educational process again. We change this thing like it's colors of the rainbow all the
We're at the
time.
front
But
of
it,
the
you know,
style guide.
what?
We're at the front of style.
We're going with evidence-based
Yeah,
experience.
no, but it's really, yeah, it's tongue in cheek what I'm saying, but it's really, we wanna make it so that it's easier for people to get their CMEs. We want you to, get the education and not make it so, you know, laborious that people are running at the end of the session trying to get all their, CMEs done. And we hope that we can process through and make it a procedure that people will want to do and, you know, keep up with their stuff and not be crunch time. You know, we all have to do CMEs, every provider, so we just want to make it an easier process. That's why we're re-looking at it again.
So, just a small insight that we developed in the Dutchess County meetings. Linda, who's our EMS coordinator for the county, has developed a specific website for EMS curriculum within the county itself that is publicly available. And we're also coordinating all our social media accounts, the local fire chiefs and myself and Arlington LaGrange to help advertise and just get the word out, and sort of, it's like a grassroots education movement. It seems to be effective.
Excellent.
Basically, off of what Andy had talked about earlier, is the region gonna be promoting towards BLS CPAP or no?
Yes. Absolutely. We had already voted on that.
Well, yeah,
Remember?
we can do it.
Yeah, it's
we have
a
to put
thing where,
process together.
You have to just apply for it, just like the programs, you know, in the past of EpiPen and such. And Bill has all the stuff, all the papers and all the, it's all set up. People just have to make the application process.
At this point in time, it has not been signed by the Director of Health for New York City. We're waiting for that to come down. Once that comes down, then it's available.
The results of the pilots were accepted and.
Yeah,
Right.
and everything was moved forward, everybody voted on it,
Which was
and,
a relatively small sample.
Yes, very small.
It was a very small sample. For some reason that came through, but I mean, empirically, it was just like no brainer. It wasn't, it was like, 15 or something like that. For the region.
Okay, anything else?